Hello, Internet. Welcome back. I'm Nathan Campos. I like drawing. You know the deal. Sorry I've been away for so long. I've been kind of busy with life. I've been working on a couple more pages for the mini comic I'm working on. I think I'm on the third page. I'm digitally inking the third page. Please forgive me. I know I want to, move more towards traditional, but I had to make some adjustments on the paper and pencils that I had done. So I had to, make adjustments digitally. So it's all good, but that's coming along very well. I did take some time to finish up the Hulk versus Hulkbuster piece. This project had taken me somewhere between, I would guesstimate somewhere between 4 to 6 hours. And it's more of a completed, fleshed out piece. I would say it's not, perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely a great exercise in trying to bring me back to being detail oriented and challenging myself with perspective and drawing buildings. Drawing buildings has always kind of been a challenge for me. And, this really is just kind of like a good exercise in trying to push myself into learning more uncomfortable or difficult information so that I can be a better artist. And I think that's important for anyone that's learning art in general, is to challenge yourself. You have to challenge yourself. Otherwise, you become stagnated. And when you become stagnated, there is no room for growth. And today, I kind of want to talk about a plethora of things. And definitely, I want to talk about the process of developing all this and seeing it through to a completed composition. But I also want to talk about some of my influences that I grew up with, and want to, really show that no matter what kind of art it is, that there is, always room for growth. Do not limit yourself. And I would say I'm definitely in a place where I feel like I'm actually making more advancements than where I was previously. In I think 2013, 2014, fall of 2013, that's when I had my one and only art class ever. Up until then, I had really entirely been self taught. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the artists and illustrators that had influenced me. Before we get into that, I want to talk about the illustration that you see here. So, I'm going to show you a quick look at what I had illustrated previously. And definitely, there's not as much depth. It's really just kind of a raw, quick image that you see. And that was me working while also speaking. And I learned that I actually have a hard time doing both at the same time. It's definitely a skill I do not possess yet, but I am trying to get better at it. But as you can see, it's pretty rough. There's a couple like adjustments that I definitely needed to make. And it wasn't because I didn't notice it at first, it's because I was just trying to put something down on the page as I was speaking. As we transition into the current piece, into the completed piece, you'll definitely notice there was a big change up on the Hulk and the Hulk's face, especially, and trying to give emotions and things that really allow an image and a character to emote is you have to really stretch their face a little bit. You got to get cartoony with it. And I would say this face is definitely kind of a mix of an anime style mixed in with traditional American comics. And it's kind of leaning more towards, I would say, like an Art Adams kind of look, but with definitely more of a Tetsuo Hara, uh, Fist of the North Star kind of aggression and rage. Um, so that's kind of where I went with the face for the Hulk is he's supposed to be monstrous. He's supposed to emote nothing but pure rage and anger. And with that, that's kind of where I went with the hair to make it more kinetic, very just frazzled. The eyebrows, I gave him really bushy eyebrows because it kind of is a bit like a Street Fighter character with big bushy eyebrows like Ryu. But I shrunk down the nose. I added a little bit more ridging along there. I made the teeth more animal-like, very kind of just like a brute, like he's a giant brute. And as you could see with the rest of the anatomy, I definitely went in and embellished a lot of the muscles, a lot of the uh, sinew of the muscle, and just try to articulate the shadows, and whether it's the obliques, the abs, the pectorals, the biceps, triceps, everything just needed to be fleshed out and brought up more. And even the quads especially, and even down to like where his feet are landing and the rippling of the concrete below him as he's charging towards the Hulkbuster. So that was definitely a good exercise in trying to, warp reality a little bit, especially for a character of this size. Where with the Hulkbuster, I noticed the spine had initially been misaligned and misplaced, so it was coming towards us, not away from us. And I had to go in and adjust where the cascading armor pieces were falling, as well as where the spine was falling. I adjusted the jet thrusters, and I added these panels, and so that they could flap up like a jet. And there would be, probably I'll add some lighting or some cool ink styling to it to make it look like it's really rushing in this direction. And I added more noise, more mechanical jargon, as it were, into the leg and into the hand and the arm and where the shoulder plating is. I added all these little honeycomb hexagons into it. I detailed out the hand, which was its own process. That was a whole situation. And then getting the honeycomb here. But this was really just to add a level of not necessarily reality, but believability in this being a gigantic machine that is capable of withstanding and potentially defeating the Hulk. With all that said, it was a lot of fun. It was a good challenge, and it was a good way to get me back into working paper and pencil, because when you work digitally, when you're inking for a while, you kind of get rusty when it comes to actually working traditional. And it does mess with you. I will fully admit it does mess with you when you work digitally, especially if you do it for consecutive days. So this project always kind of kept me back to understanding, no, this is what it's like to draw. This is how your hand-eye coordination works. I would say definitely drawing on an iPad messes with your hand-eye coordination a little bit because it doesn't always listen to you. It doesn't always understand what it is you want. So you kind of have to lean and work towards what the iPad can do versus what you are capable of. Anyways, that being said, let's talk about the background. So this is kind of like a borough in the East Coast, I guess. Like, I really wasn't going for like a mega metropolis kind of look. I was just trying to fit what I could within the canvas and within the composition that made it more believable as an illustration. So I started out previously in the other video with just kind of laying out very basic squares. And over the course of a few days, I was really having to sit and figure out where to place like the buildings, the windows. You see a lot of repeated little patterns of like the windows. It's really just trying to fill out the space and try to convince the viewer that what they are seeing is a neighborhood in a city. And whether it's adding the shawarma, little deli, or having a little hot dog shop back here, having a destroyed little car, or not little, I think it was like a truck that I just wanted to see like destroyed. Adding little smokes, streaks of movement behind the Hulk to make it look like he's in motion. Adding little antenna and wires across the buildings. Even the water towers at the top of the building. Um, Windows, little rivets here and there, just to try to really flesh out the background, flesh out the building. Um, and over here, we have a little. I didn't know what to place here because there's just an open square, and I didn't want to continue drawing a building, so I made it like an alleyway. And in my head, I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to fill in an alleyway? So I had to quickly put together, like, oh, there's like ladders, like fire escapes outside of buildings and like apartments. So I'm like, okay, I'll throw that in there. So I threw that in there in this area. And then I'm like, well, they usually tag up or put something or posters in an alleyway for like some, rock show. And I'm currently listening to a lot of uh, Run the Jewels and a lot of the work by Killer Mike and LP. They're separate discographies. And I decided to throw just a quick little nod to them. Killer Mike on the far end and LP closer and RTJ in the center. So that's just a little nod to them. I love those guys. I think they're amazing artists and definitely good examples of how to evolve as an artist and how to improve on not just your work, but with each other as collaborators and to challenge each other to do the very best you can. And I think it's awesome that they've had such varied and unique careers, but find uh, such great success with one another and separately now. And yeah, they're just great guys, and their music is amazing. Highly recommend Run the Jewels. Yeah, it's just a good time listening to them. Shout out to Ryan Romero for putting me on uh, to Run the Jewels way back in 2015 when their second album came out, and told me that Zach De La Rocha was on that album. Anyways, quick sidebar. Back to it. So, with this illustration, I would say there's probably two to three main influences on this piece. And I would say the biggest influence that I would have is definitely Brian Hitch. A lot of people don't necessarily realize that back in the early 2000s, uh, Alex Ross, that realistic watercolor painting style, was king. And work like Kingdom Come and his work at DC really just brought such depth and like intense artistic integrity to uh, comic books at large that these pieces were being displayed in like museums and stuff, and they were incredible. And Alex Ross, give the man credit. That guy really changed the game and really like set in stone a style and a name for himself, and it blew everyone away, even me. Like, I have one of his books, Mythology, and it's amazing. It's an amazing walkthrough of his career and his path as an artist. But in that time, in the early 2000s, there was also another illustrator named Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch is someone that you might know from The Ultimates way back in the early 2000s when he collaborated with Mark Millar. And Brian Hitch had this realistic, photorealistic, kind of cinematic style. And he was really pulling from films by Jerry Bruckheimer, Michael Bay, and, in some regard, like any tentpole modern action film, he was kind of influenced by and really bringing in a lot of like the Michael Bay kind of style to it, but with comic book characters. And I would say I had definitely been caught early on just trying to emulate his style, really having his deep shadow kind of shading. And there was a book he released back in 2010, which is Brian Hitch's Ultimate Comics Studio. And what was cool about it is that it really walks you through his history as an artist. And again, he's someone that's done like incredible work throughout his career. And again, having more of a cinematic, realistic style. There's some page layouts, which is pretty cool. But he's done full compositions like this, where the perspective is insane. It's nuts. The perspective is nuts. You'll have to excuse me. Um, but his work and his work ethic and his ability to lay out and find an image is what really makes him so like insane. Like I love his work. I've always loved his work, and uh, it's definitely a challenge to try to maintain that kind of realistic style, that realistic look, without losing time on a deadline. And I know that definitely impacted him trying to emulate realistic styles. So he's an amazing artist, but definitely someone that uh, suffered from having to deal with the pressure of trying to bring his best work at all times and dealing with deadline pressures. And hats off to him because he's an absolute legend, and his work is seminal for things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If there is no Ultimates, we really don't get something similar to what we see in the Avengers, which is very cinematic, epic cinema. But in the first two arcs of the Ultimates, it's really, you know, relevant and relative to what the early MCU films were. So definitely hats off to Brian Hitch. He was definitely a big influence. But in that time, I also realized, like, for me as an artist, I can't always emulate reality, because then that just becomes, you know, a, a bit too difficult for me to constantly maintain and try to keep it realistic at all times. That's not so simple when you have to draw, pages and pages of comics. And right now I'm doing more of a fantasy narrative. And so it's really just kind of being more loose with how you express your art and how you show characters while still giving that cinematic vibe that I want to maintain, but keeping it more cartoonish. Try to make it more like a comic where it has more of a heightened kind of reality. Not every face has to follow the rules of what reality provides us. And I also really do take influence from an artist named Neil Adams, who was known for his work on Batman. And this is the Neil Adams sketchbook, which was incredible. And what I love about his style is that it is photorealistic, but it still knows how to look cartoonish and be explosive and highly energetic and stylistic, but not giving way to trying to be overtly realistic. So I absolutely love his work. Neil Adams, R.I.P. to a legend. But this artist is definitely someone that made an impact along with Greg Capullo. Just again, look at these beautiful, beautiful just sketches. These are just sketches. I believe this is Tommy Lee Jones from the Men in Black film, and that's Muhammad Ali, the champ. So yeah, and here's like really quick rough sketches, rough doodles, and like this beautiful, beautiful illustration. Again, he's an artist, and he can do realistic, he could do photorealistic, but he can also break and bend the rules. and it's amazing stuff. It's really cool. There you go. There's Jackie Chan. Um, I have no idea who this is, but there you go. But like I said, Neil Adams, what a G, what a great guy. And so that these influences, these artists, are where I try to push myself creatively, but also try to do my own thing stylistically. And right now I'm kind of in a place where I'm trying to break away from being so hyper realistic, so hyper, you know, cinematic like a Brian Hitch, where I'm trying to lean more towards like cartoony, more bouncy like a Greg Capullo or a Daniel Warren Johnson or Sean Crystal, Jim Mahfood, and Eric Canetti, and Mateo Scalera, like all those dudes at Ink Pulp. Those are guys that really made their own stylistic language and their own visual language. And right now I'm trying to find that style, find that language, and be, you know, conscious of my influences, but also trying to bring my own energy to it. So right now, that's kind of where I'm at with my style. Is, you know, it's taking influences that I grew up with and trying to mash them all together into what I put on page. So that's like I'm currently going back. I've been looking at a lot of stuff by Akiman and Bengus of Street Fighter, the Street Fighter video games, and Marvel vs. Capcom, and really just trying to look at that energetic style that they had for the video games that they produced at Capcom, and just again trying to loosen up the illustration while maintaining the energy and cartoony nature of it. So those are definitely a few of my influences that I'm currently trying to understand, whether it's Tetsuo Hara of Fist of the North Star, like I mentioned before, just trying to find and figure out where to place an influence. And it's almost like being a rap producer. You're just trying to take different samples, different pieces of information, different styles, different pieces of music, and you're just trying to cut it together and put your own style to it and your own beat to it, and creating something different with it. And that's why I think I really love people and groups like Run the Jewels, because they are influenced by their childhoods, but they are able to create something new while honoring their past. And I think that's beautiful. And if you're an artist, if you're an illustrator, and you're just trying to find your way, uh, it's okay. It's okay to honor the past, but also understand where you're going creatively. And right now, I think I'm getting to a place where I'm trying to find my actual style, where I'm just not aping, you know, an anime artist, a comic book artist, an illustrator, or tattoo artist. I'm just trying to visually convey what it is I see in my head to the best of my ability, and with the influences and with the information that I have, and the training that I have. And whether it's understanding perspective, you know, I'm still green, I'm still learning, or if it's, you know, trying to break away from being a digital artist for so many years, from 2014 to about 2023 when I started picking up quill and ink again. So again, it's about growth. It's about being patient. It's about understanding what you're doing stylistically and artistically, and pushing yourself. Always push yourself to do your best to create work that you are proud of, work that you can show others, and if even if you don't want to show others, just make it. And that's the cool thing about art. Just make art. Have fun with it. And I think that's gonna wrap up today's episode. It was a quick, short one. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, have a great day. Adios.